My name is Amanda Thomas. If you're following me here from TikTok, thank you so much. TikTok absolutely refuses to give me the 10-minute option for my videos, so I've just made a YouTube page to get more information out on some of these cases that we talk about. So if that's something you're interested, feel free to subscribe down below and turn the little bell icon on so you can be notified when I upload. I do want to give a quick warning that the things we discuss here are pretty heavy, so if that's something that your mental health cannot handle, just feel free to click off this video and I'll catch you somewhere else, but your mental health is so much more important than a YouTube video. Also, just so you know, today's case is extremely confusing. I had such a hard time researching it, but I think I've done a pretty good job of getting the timeline right, so bear with me as we get through it. We will get through it. But Fall River, Massachusetts is best known for the Lizzie Borden case. And if you don't know, on August 4th of 1892, Lizzie Borden's father, Andrew Borden, and his wife and Lizzie's stepmother, Abby, were bludgeoned to death by an axe in their home. Many people believed that Lizzie was responsible for these murders, and in fact, she was tried for the murders, but later acquitted. Some people still believe that she was guilty of this, and others believe that she was taken over by something evil. And while the Lizzie Borden case has long since passed, the evil that surrounds it still lingers. In 1980, a book titled Michelle Remembers came out. It was written by a Canadian psychologist who had a client that she put under hypnosis. And while under hypnosis, this client told her memories of being in a satanic cult and harmful things happening to her during that time. While the context of this book has been heavily disputed, the book still gained major popularity in the 1980s, and in fact it was so popular that some social workers and police departments took it and used it as training material. So it wasn't surprising when in 1983 a woman from Manhattan Beach, California came to police with accusations that her son had told her that his daycare provider was hurting him in satanic rituals. This investigation was handled horribly, and police would send out letters to 200 families asking them to have conversations with their children to see if anyone had witnessed anything or been a part of anything. And all of this led rise to what we now know as satanic panic. Personally, I still think that we suffer from satanic panic to this day. A lot of people think that ritualistic murder and those types of things still happen, and none of this has ever been proven. There is no documented evidence of a satanic ritual happening in a murder, but this will not stop people from talking about it. So I'm going to take you back to Fall River, Massachusetts. On October 14th of 1979, two joggers had gone to a local high school to use the track for their morning run. It was there that they found a body under the bleachers. It was a body of a woman. She had been beaten so badly that they couldn't recognize her. She was also tied, and it looked like she had been essayed, and she was bludgeoned to death. And police would not find her name until they released a composite sketch of her. After releasing this composite sketch, they found the name of the victim. Her name was Doreen Levesque. Doreen had not had an easy life. In fact, she had ran away from her foster home, and this led her into a life of sex work and drugs. She also didn't have a permanent address that she could call home. Witnesses say that she last saw her the night before. She was intoxicated and she was with another sex worker named Gail. And at the crime scene, she had been posed in a very specific way, leading police to believe that this might be the work of a serial killer. Barbara Raposa would be the next victim. Barbara was a single mom and she struggled to make ends meet, so in order to do that, she worked as a sex worker. She was reported missing by her father on November 7th of 1979. He reported her missing after she didn't show up to pick up her son. Witnesses stated that they last saw her at 8:15 on November 7th, and she was getting a ride from a male friend to go do her work. The thing is, her body would not be found for a very long time. She wasn't found until January 26th of 1980. Hunters who were outside of Fall River were in the woods hunting when they stumbled upon her body. Barbara had also been tied up and she was also beaten to death. Karen Marsden was another sex worker in the area. In fact, police were talking to her about Doreen's murder, But while they were talking to her, she seemed afraid and she was rambling a lot. She talked about someone named Satan, and that's who was responsible for the murder. But when pressured for the name of Satan, who Satan was, she refused to give him the answer, saying she was afraid that she would die if she gave them the answer. She then asked to be dropped off at a local church because she wanted to speak to a priest. Police offered her protection, but even that wasn't enough to convince her to give the name of whoever this Satan was. It was the very next day that she was reported missing by her grandmother. Karen did struggle, but she was very good at keeping in touch with her loved ones, especially her grandmother. She also had a son that was in the foster system that she was very adamant in trying to stay in touch with and trying to build a relationship with him. Her skull was found several months later on April 13th of 1980, but her body was never found. Fall Rivers had fallen on financial hardship during this time, and things were getting rough in that area, especially in a place called Harbor Terrace. Harbor Terrace was a low-income housing type place, and a lot of criminal activity would happen around it. It was said that if you wanted anything at all, you could just go to this area and you would be able to get what you wanted. In fact, a lot of the sex workers would line up right across the street from the police department. But even the police kind of turned a blind eye to it, even though a lot of these women were underage, and they could not consent to what was happening to them. They were being sex trafficked. There was also another rumor going around that this was a hotspot for satanic rituals, that animal sacrifices would happen, and the rumor was that these women had been offered to Satan as a sacrifice. All of this leads us to Robin Murphy. Now, this is where it gets really, really confusing. Robin also came from a very difficult background, and she had suffered a lot. But Robin also wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. It was said that she was pretty aggressive, and she had really no fear, even towards some of the more violent men in the area. She was a pimp, and she knew all of the victims. Robin did have competition when it came to her business, I guess you could say, and his name was Karl Drew. Karl Drew was more prominent in the area, but that didn't mean that both of them weren't mean and cruel. But it was said that Karl would often intimidate people with ritual sacrifice and those types of things to scare them into doing what he wanted them to do. Karl was already on police radar for the murders of these three women, but it didn't help when Robin came in as a police informant and told them many things, like she had been at the murders with Karl when they had happened. Robin told police that Karl had killed Doreen because she had refused to work for him. He then killed Karen because he was afraid that she would talk to police. Robin agreed to testify to all of this to convict Karl. She even went on to say that Karl had played with Karen's head after the murder, and he had even carved an X into her body and performed ritual sacrifice on her. She also said that Karl had cut off Karen's finger and taken the ring from it. This was backed up by testimony from a woman who said that Karl had later given that ring to her at a bar. Robin also went on to say that she had not only been to the human sacrifices that Karl had performed, but also many different sacrifices, that he was heavily into this satanic ritual type stuff. She went into elaborate detail about these devil-worshipping satanic rituals. She even went on to say that he would speak in tongues while doing all of this. And this was right when satanic panic was starting to pick up speed, and so police believed it. And all of this was shocking to newspapers and TV stations and all of this. Everyone picked it up. The problem with all of this is there is literally no physical evidence that puts Karl at the scene of any of the murders. And not only that, but all of Robin's testimony isn't true. She would later recant all of it, saying that this didn't happen. She came out and said that the prosecution had given her a deal, saying that if she would testify to these things, that she would be given a 12-year second-degree murder charge. And she did think that Karl was responsible for the very first murder, and that was enough to make her believe that he was responsible for all of the murders. Regardless of all of this, Karl was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Karen Marsden. There was not enough evidence to convict him of the other crimes, and so he wasn't sentenced for any of those. The woman who backed up the testimony about the ring even came out later saying that police had coerced her into testifying about this, saying that they would convict her of another crime if she didn't say these things during her testimony. Now, there is another man in this really complicated story named Andy Malte. Andy Malte was a very vicious man. He was extremely brutal, and he would often carry around tools with him so he could attack young women. During the investigation of these murders, Andy came forward saying that he wanted to help police, even though he had a long criminal record. He said he had had a vision while he was dreaming about Barbara, and he knew what had happened to her. When talking with police, he said that he had seen the murder weapon, but he didn't quite know what it was, and the police asked him, was it a knife, was it a gun, and he said, I think it was a rock. Andy even took police to where Barbara had been found. He then said he sensed a murder weapon around him, and it was a piece of cement. Now, he knew way too much about this crime, and police did not believe that he was psychic, so he was arrested for this murder. It was then again that Robin came in and testified, saying that she had been with him during the murder of Karen. So because of all of this, Andy was also convicted of Karen's crime, all while Karl is still sitting in prison. And once again, Robin came out years later saying that she had made the entire thing up, that none of it was true. Robin had been a victim of Andy in some of his attacks, and many people believe that she was just trying to get revenge for what he had done for her. In a recent documentary, people came out saying that anybody who reads the testimony or the evidence in the case will end up saying that Karl is innocent of this crime. In fact, the Massachusetts Innocence Project is working on his case, but all of his appeals have ran out, so they really need new evidence to be able to exonerate him for this crime. Karl was a man who couldn't read or write, and he had also had a very difficult life. In fact, he was quoted saying that he did not believe that the American justice system could send an innocent man to jail. To this day, Karl says that he is innocent and he did not commit these murders. And to me, it seems a little bit more believable that Andy was responsible for these, considering his previous attacks on women and what he had done in the past. He was an awful man. Unfortunately, Andy died in prison a couple of years ago, and so he is not able to speak on this anymore. There is also no proof that any of these murders happened because of religious belief or devil worship or satanic rituals or anything like that. And to me, it seems like there is an innocent man stuck behind bars. But what do you think? I'd really like to know your thoughts in the comments. And if you have more you can add to the story, I'd love to hear it down in the comments below. Either way, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I know this one was kind of short and really confusing, but I hope you got something out of it. Either way, leave your thoughts in the comments and I'll see you next time. Bye.